stock, yeah, we got to grit. Our hearts on our sleeves and our backs flying high. Proud to be, proud to live, proud to try.
Welcome, everybody, to Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage, here on MLSsoccer.com. We're here for the US-Portugal preview, a huge matchup, which was made even bigger by the result yesterday in the Germany-Ghana game. I want to remind everybody, we're here for fan interaction. We're going to give away some cool Castrol World Cup swag throughout the show, and you can get it a couple different ways. You can tweet at us using the hashtag BrazilBound, or we'll pull some comments that we've seen in articles before. But for the first time ever, we're going to try something a little different. We're going to try taking some phone calls here. Hopefully that works out. The number 212-481-1951. We hope to hear from you during the show. We'll patch those calls through. You can ask questions to our experts, Jesse Marsch, Simon Borg, and of course, Greg Lalas, also here joining us today. I'm your host, Jason Saghini. Guys, let's talk a little bit about what we saw yesterday. Germany and Ghana played to an unexpected 2-2 draw. I think a lot of people thought this German machine was going to roll over Ghana. Instead, we get a 2-2 result, and that means the U.S. in the driver's seat for Group G.
Yes, but you can look at it in one of two ways. The draw opens the door for the U.S. to possibly go top of the group and fight for that #1 spot if they can beat Portugal. But on the other side, I don't think now that that game ended in a tie, you can be happy if you're a U.S. fan with a draw in this game today against Portugal. Because if you're going into that last game with 4 points, tied with Germany, and Portugal and Ghana are still in play going into that last game, and there's no way Portugal and Ghana are finishing as a draw. That someone's going to win that game if they're both fighting for a spot. That's a dangerous spot to be in when your game is against Germany.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to make that call right now, and it's a little bit of a perilous situation that the U.S. is in, but it's a good one to be in. And it's interesting because actually a draw could be really good.
Yeah, I think Simon's math is incorrect here.
When you factor
a draw is great for the U.S. because they go into the match against Germany. A draw against Germany puts both Germany and the U.S. through.
And listen, and on top of that, a loss could be against Germany could be enough because it could go down to goal differential, and now the U.S. could still be ahead there. So
certainly it can, but when you look at the group standings, remember, if the U.S. draws this game against Portugal, they draw against Germany, both those teams are on 5 points. They're through to the next round. Germany is the first seed, U.S. as the second seed. Jurgen Klinsmann's going to text Jozy Low and say, hey, I'll see you in the round of 16.
No. Cynical way of thinking by an American who, during qualifying, goes into Panama and has to beat the Panamanians when they have the World Cup in their hands, a World Cup berth in their hands. That's not the way Americans work. And don't underestimate Jurgen Klinsmann and Joachim Low, their pride going into this game. Don't just assume, okay, yeah, a draw is good for both teams. That's what's going to happen. I mean, look, the American team, we fight till the end.
It comes down to, are you cocky enough to think that we can be the best team in the group, or do you just want to advance? That's really what it comes down to in the different scenarios.
Look, when you look at it, there's a game to be played first. Obviously, the U.S.-Portugal is what we're talking about today. We'll get that U.S.-Germany game, and we'll have a preview show for that as well. But let's talk about this one. The game happening tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can see it on ESPN and Univision, and that's coming to you from Manaus, an area in the tropical rainforest that has been a talk of the tournament for times, for field conditions, for weather. We have our own Andrew Wiebe down there. Let's hear what he had to say. He arrived last night, went to both press conferences, and he has word from both press conferences, from both coaches, and about the injury situation as well as the weather and field situation.
Andrew Wiebe reporting from Manaus following the U.S. national team's final training session and media availability ahead of Sunday's game against Portugal. Clint Dempsey was scheduled to be on the dais next to Tim Howard and Jurgen Klinsmann this afternoon, but he was a no-show, a late scratch for Jermaine Jones. So we didn't get to ask, how's that nose feeling? Is the humidity affecting him? Can he breathe? Has he been sleeping well enough to be prepared for this game? Jurgen Klinsmann answered the questions himself. He said Clint Dempsey is good. He is fine for this match. And he also said, with a golden opportunity in front of the Americans, remember, a win gets them through the knockout round, that they want to take the match to Portugal. Their game plan calls for bottling up Cristiano Ronaldo. Of course, easier said than done, but they are not talking about Portugal anymore. As of Saturday morning, Tim Howard said his coach put the nix on any talk about their opponent. Meanwhile, in the Portugal camp, all the talk is about absences. The three main ones who are for sure out. Pepe, the red card, of course. Fabio Contrao and Hugo Almeida both suffering from muscle injuries. And Bruno Alves, also a large question mark. He did not train on Friday or Saturday. Another muscle issue curtailing the other starting center back. Without he or Pepe, potentially, that could be a big chance for the Americans. As far as Cristiano Ronaldo goes, all good on that front, says Paulo Bento. He says he's not going to talk about it anymore. Ronaldo at 100%. But what Paulo Bento does know is that Portugal, if they don't win this game, they're in big, big trouble, likely out of the tournament. He said they'll have to pack their suitcases if they go down against the U.S.
All right, Andrew talked about the injury situation, the players missing for Portugal, and that's a huge story in this game because when you look at it, they have Pepe out, probably their best defender red-carded for this match, and then two more injuries amongst that back line. That's a depleted Portuguese team. It should have the U.S. licking their chops, I would think.
Yeah, I think you have to be a little bit careful, though, because the replacements are still very good players that play for good clubs and that week in, week out are compete for prizes, right? So I don't think, and Michael Bradley even mentioned it a little bit in one of his interviews and talked about we have to be careful in assuming that Portugal is a defeated team right now. I think they're going to get their mentality straight. They're going to make the changes they need to make, and this is going to be a good team and one that's really going to test us.
I think when you look at the spots where there are absences, I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off at center back with the guys they can bring in, Ricardo Costa and Neto. I don't think there would be a big drop-off at goalkeeper where if the regular doesn't go, you have Neto, who's the Beto, who's the guy from Sevilla. They just won the Europa League. At forward, I would argue that Hugo Almeida out makes for a better option because Hugo Almeida is a burly striker who I think is more defendable for U.S. defenders than the guys they're bringing in who are more mobile and are more tricky up top. So I actually think, aside from Contrao, who's the left back, who brings a lot, but a left back, don't come tell me a left back is going to be the difference between winning or losing a game. Left back is nice to have.
We said last game that the U.S. right back, Fabian Johnson, would be the difference in the game.
It's a luxury to have a left back like Contrao, but he's not going to decide this game.
All right. Portuguese injuries and absences is one story, but the U.S. obviously dealing with their own. Jozy Altidore, of course, the biggest name. I'll take the first question from Twitter coming in about Jozy, and that's from Dala Dala Bill. That's a great Twitter handle. He says, who replaces Jozy in the 11? Let's get your thoughts on that as we look at the U.S. injury situation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a question mark, and there's, whether they choose to play with Clint Dempsey up there all by himself.
Sure.
I tend to think that they'll replace it with Wando. Okay, and they put Johansson in last game, and I don't think he had a very good performance and wasn't able to really help the game out at all. And I think maybe it's a time for Wando to play. And the good thing about that is it brings Dempsey in underneath and keeps him in that role that he's been effective in. There's question marks about whether Boyd or Eddie Johnson would have helped out in this situation. And yeah, there's potential that one of those two guys could have been a factor now in a moment like this. But you have to look at this roster and you have to think about maximizing what your player pool and talent is for this match.
Guys, quick thing though, you bring up Aaron Johansson and his performance in the Ghana game. Do you really think Klinsmann is basing who he's going to play based on that performance alone?
Well, I think, for me, I think he would have to take in all the variables. And a big one for sure is his last performance.
Yeah.
And how did he do on the big stage? And that's how, we could talk about John Brooks later, but when you get your opportunities, you have to prove that you're ready for that moment. You're ready for that challenge, that you're not afraid. And for me, that's still a question mark on how Johansson played.
I agree with Jesse that it has to be Wando by process of elimination. It's not going to be Johansson for the reasons we've just discussed. And it can't be Dempsey alone. Because if you go and get into a game with Dempsey all by himself up top, You're basically renouncing to attacking. You're basically saying, we can't score goals in this game. We're not interested in scoring goals. So it has to be Wondolowski.
I don't totally agree with that. I think you could play Dempsey up there, and now you could give more of attacking freedom to guys like Jozy, put him on the outside. Bedoya, if he's ready to go. Brad Davis, Michael Bradley could be.
But they're not scoring goals for you, Jesse.
But they have scored goals in qualifying with their club teams, and you're not totally taking a defensive posture, but you're using Clint in a little bit different way.
The one thing I think that Wondolowski brings that maybe Johansson doesn't bring is the work rate. And when you need that forward to be pressuring the ball early, for me, that's where Wondo makes the difference. And, I think that's going to be potentially the reason that I would lean towards Wondo as well in this situation. I agree with Simon. I don't necessarily like Dempsey alone up top. So we have our first caller coming in. We'll take this call. It's on the topic of Chris Wondolowski. Go ahead.
Hi. I was wondering, with Jozy Altidore obviously not playing in this game, and seeing Aaron Johansson's performance in the last, 60 minutes or so of the game against Ghana. First, do you think that Chris Wondolowski is going to start in the game against Portugal tonight? And more importantly, does that cause an overall tactical shift for the team if they play with Chris Wondolowski as a striker in the game?
All right, thanks a lot. So does Chris Wondolowski coming in as a sub create any sort of tactical shift for the U.S. team that wouldn't otherwise be made against Portugal?
I think it's seamless. No, I mean, he's just another forward. They've played the two-forward system with Dempsey and Altidore. I think he slots right in. It's pretty seamless. You can keep the system you have going where it's diamond attacking, the diamond in your attacking formation, and then you have all the guys coming back, 5 midfielders in your defensive formation. But
theoretically, it doesn't change the approach of the rest of the players, but the biggest question mark is how will Wondo do in moments when balls get played up to him with his back to goal? Will he be able to find what he does most often in those situations is just play a simple ball back to a midfielder who's joining in.
And I think that's what you want here.
Yes,
right?
But the question is how easily will he be able to do that in a game like this? Okay, he can do that in certain qualifiers in an MLS, but now when the game gets ramped up and it's more physical and it's faster, how effective will he be in that aspect of the game?
Guys, I think it's also important to think about that. I think there is a little bit of a tactical shift in that because Wondo is not as effective as Jozy as a target man, able to handle all that, I think it actually forces Dempsey to slide a little bit forward so that there are actually two forwards more side by side than we've maybe seen in the past where it's been sort of one above the other. Because I don't think that Wondo can do all that work alone. And if the U.S. isn't getting a second person up there able to do some of the target man work, they're going to be, I think they're in trouble.
The other thing, if we're going to get picky about Wondo and what he does differently than Jozy, Wando's not running those channels. And so that means that the midfielders are going to have to make it more of a point to join the attack. Because otherwise, who's making those runs? So,
and outside backs. And then let's go to Wando's strength, which is if we can now start to play in their end of the field and use our outside backs and find ways to get midfielders up the field, Wondo will be in around the box and he will get chances.
Look,
he will definitely get chances.
We saw it against Mexico before, before their send-off series, that Wondo pairing up top. Did well. He did well with Dempsey playing in that game against Mexico. Scored the goal, remember, off that Michael Bradley header. I want to ask you a question. This question came in. I think it's kind of good to reflect back because this was a conversation we were having before the World Cup started when the roster announcement came. This question came in from Shad Hussein, and basically he says, Klinsmann could have taken Terrence Boyd. He could have taken Eddie Johnson. We all kind of thought that he would have been in the camp. And now you're looking at a situation where he says, Klinsmann really screwed up on some roster selections. And look, that's the way he's going to word it. That's his opinion. We question the roster selection. And now you have Jozy Altidore going down, and we're looking at what that's brought. Is Klinsmann responsible if this doesn't work out, whether it's Wondolowski or Aaron Johansson? I mean, is it going to come back to him as hey, what was the deal with the roster selection? You have Julian Green on your bench who might not see a minute in this World Cup. Yep. You could have had, again, Terrence Boyd, Eddie Johnson, Landon Donovan, etc.
The answer to it is yes, okay? But that doesn't necessarily mean that he made decisions that he thought were best for the team, okay? And now we can debate that and what that means. Frankly, wouldn't it be great now with Jozy out that maybe Clint could play more of the role that Jozy did, and maybe Landon could come in and play underneath and play a little bit of the role of what Clint's going to be doing. So, from a fan perspective, certainly that would be nice to have as an option. But no matter what happens in this, if it doesn't go well, it's going to fall on Klinsmann's shoulders, and that's part of being the manager.
You know what this Jozy situation also brings up for me is, what a dumb rule. That if you have a major injury that keeps a player out, that you can't go and make 1 or 2 substitutions during a tournament. Like, what does that prove? Like, let's think about it a little. What does it prove that, okay, I have an injury, now I can't replace him? Like, why not?
Well, you can get into types of injuries. There's such a gray area. And
have a FIFA doctor go in, examine it himself, and let a team make the change.
There's 23 players on the roster. That's plenty of numbers. I don't know why you need to go any deeper.
And the other thing you look at is, what if the U.S. want to have Jozy potentially back for the round of 16
but at
or
least
the
you have a
quarterfinals?
choice. At least you have a choice where if it's medically proven that injury is going to keep you out for a game or more, you should be able to.
But then what if it's 1 and it becomes 2, or if it's 2 and it becomes 3? It's part of your job as a coach to look at your roster, understand you have a lot of options with 23 guys. It's your job now to think about injuries, to think about tactics, to think about the balance of the team, and put 23 players together that prepare you for whatever comes your way.
I agree wholeheartedly. That is one of the beauties of the World Cup is roster selection.
But what does it
prove?
Down. What does it prove? It's not proving anything.
It proved you made the right decisions at the time. All right, guys, I'm going to move us along here as we talk about this game. And we mentioned that it's in Manaus, and you saw Andrew Wiebe down there. It's hot, it's humid, it's in the rainforest. The weather for this match going to be pretty similar to Houston from what we've seen, right? You can see there the video from Manaus, what it's like there. The field conditions come into question. We've seen a couple games there already. The heat and humidity have come into question. How does it affect this match when you look at 2 teams that had a bunch of injuries in the first game? And you saw all the hamstrings that the U.S. players were holding on to. How is this now going to affect the game, the weather in Manaus?
Well, it certainly highlights all the preparation in the lead up to the World Cup to make sure that you got your fitness right, that now you're getting all your travel right, what you're eating, what you're drinking. So all the science to the sport comes into play. But from a player perspective, the biggest thing when you play in these hot games is how the fatigue affects your decision making. Okay, and you wind up now at different moments as you get tired, just ball watching and not including all the factors that are happening in the game. And you can sometimes get caught now, stuck, not thinking quick enough, not moving quick enough, but your brain just manages to shut down. So that's the toughest part.
And let's also bring in how this impacts, to me, who gets the first goal. The first goal is so important here because then the other team, the team that has to come back, not only are you fighting against the opposition, who may decide to pack it in, I can see both teams doing that. We saw the U.S. do it against Ghana. But also you're fighting against the elements and the weather. And it makes it that much harder. Now, what the weather conditions in Manaus also do, and we saw it in the Germany-Ghana game yesterday, is the field, when it's harder, and Germany complained about this, they felt it nullified their technical players in midfield. And so he said, our technical guys had a harder time, Joachim Low said, because the field was harder. And when you step on it, you get stuck. The ball gets stuck. Which, for the U.S., that could benefit them in this game.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it'll be the field conditions will be a factor, and the weather for sure will be a factor.
Excuses, though. They're just making excuses. What bogged down their midfield was not the field. It was Ghana. So, they're talking about the field. Both teams play on the same field. And so you go out there and you play that same thing.
I know, I get they both play on the same field, but conditions will hurt some teams but more than others based on their tendencies.
Fine, but conditions are always going to be part of the game. And to look at them and say, this is why we lost, or this is why whatever it is, you could also go, we lost because we gave up 2 goals, or we drew because we gave up 2 goals. So there's always something. Conditions are part of the game. Refereeing, it's all part of the game. You have to take it into account.
Look, and the field might loosen up a little. We're expecting it to rain. I mean, you see the weather forecast there. They're expecting there to be rain there. It might not be as hard a field. It might get sloppy. We'll see who that is going to help when it comes down to it. I want to turn our attention now a little bit more towards the lineups and tactics. And Jesse, you can head over to the board with Greg. We're going to take a look now at the Portugal lineup that we expect in this game, what they're going to do to replace all those players that were injured, and of course Pepe. Let's take a look at what we're expecting here.
All right, thanks, Jason. So yeah, obviously the injuries, the red card to Pepe means they're going to have to make some changes. The guys talked about it a little bit over there at the desk, but now let's take a little bit more of a look and see how this system works a little bit, how the U.S. might be able to contend with it, what the new guys bring, and maybe if there are some other changes that we foresee possibly happening. So let's start actually in the back where it's Almeida, Alves, Costa, and Pereira. And the big one here is Bruno Alves, by the way, might actually have a little bit of an injury. They've been going back, a little bit like Ronaldo, they're going back and forth. No, he's not injured. Yes, he has a little bit of an injury. So talk us through the back line a little bit first.
Well, Costa came in against Germany,
Pepe.
so you think he'll be in again. Almeida as well. So the question with Bruno Alves is he's a big, strong presence back there, right? But if they do make the change and bring in NATO, I watched NATO and Costa play against Ireland at the Meadowlands last month, and those two worked very well together. Mm-hmm. They really step and drop well together. They play off of each other's shoulders, and Ireland had a really tough time on the day creating any chances because of the way those two played. So I don't think they lose too much there.
So in the midfield, all right, let's step up there. Now, this is a little bit of a defensive setup. I know Simon's over there sort of licking his chops about how, it's a little too defensive for what Portugal might go. So walk us through that a little bit.
Well, and we think that William might come in and he might play instead of Veloso.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. Williams, more of a defensive presence. Veloso's more of an attacking presence. So if they do choose to play Veloso, what they had in that game is then they have some soccer in the midfield and they can find some passing lanes, and they hopefully in those moments feel like they can lead and start the attack for their good attacking players. William, a lot stronger, big physical presence, but I still think in the end that we'll wind up seeing William in that spot today.
Okay, and up top, this is the big move. Obviously, Ronaldo, we all expect him to play.
Yeah.
That's a given. Eder's the big one. Hugo Almeida with an injury. How does Eder differ from Hugo Almeida?
Well, Eder's funny. When I was putting the team together in Montreal, that was a player that we were considering, and I liked him a lot. He just became too expensive. But what he is he is a big guy, and he's an athletic guy, but he likes to play with his feet, all right? So he'll be finding more availability to play through him so he can turn, so he can go at guys, so that he can combine with Cristiano Ronaldo. He's good in the box as well. But for being a big guy, it's not his focus to just be up there and be a target guy with strength. Right. He's mobile. He'll move around. He's a good soccer player.
But more often than not, he's not doing this really and curling in, right? He's more likely going to be checking back like this to help out.
His main occupation will be to play against the two center backs. And then when he does come underneath, they'll look for runs with Nani and Ronaldo to get behind. But with this team mostly, when you have Ronaldo and Nani out wide, is they usually look to play the balls to their feet, have the outside backs join in, right? And now there's one-on-one situations with the outside back joining in, and then Ronaldo and Nani seeing if they can either slip a ball to a guy like Eder or if they can whip a cross in. So that's what their attack is built around.
Now, the only other change we may see, guys, is that Postiga comes in for Eder. Let's get this going here. And if Postiga comes in, a little bit of an older guy, how does he differ if he's starting instead?
He's not as mobile as he used to be, but he's a poacher and he's a goal scorer. Mm-hmm. And he's really smart with his movement around the box. The only question I have is in some of the warm-ups lately, when he's come in the game, he hasn't looked sharp. So I would guess that that's not what they go with and that they choose to go with Eder. The only other question is, does Ronaldo slip up there? And then they can bring in Valera and push Nani to the left. Nani likes to play from the left as well. So I don't think they'll do it. It's a little bit of the same discussion that we have with what the U.S. is going to do with Dempsey.
All right, Jay, you got a comment. What's going on?
Well, first I want to remind everyone who's watching that you can call in to talk to us, to ask questions to any of these guys. 212-481-1951 is the number, and I'll throw it over to Simon for the next question for you guys.
Greg, you mentioned the two defensive midfielders. I think with two guys who have defensive tendencies in Carvalho and Meireles, I think one of them will get subbed out for either Vieirinha or Veloso. I think everyone assumes it would be Veloso, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vieirinha is there as well. He's more of a guy who likes to shift left as well. So I think there's no reason for them to have two holding guys the way the U.S. is going to come at them.
The only thing is what that can do in those moments, can you clear it please, is it can move Morales a little bit more in the attack, and sometimes it might even look like a 4-1-4-1. And with his passing ability and his soccer that he provides in the attack, that could be a good thing for moving forward, combining with Ronaldo and these guys. So
you like Morales pushing up?
Yes, in those moments, if he plays next to William, then he takes on more of a playmaking role.
I would also say this, though, Simon. You bring up a good point in that if Veloso comes in here instead, right? So let's just throw Veloso in there. One thing we don't talk about Moutinho is he's very creative on the ball, and we all think of him as the playmaker, but he has spent periods of his career holding back a little bit more. So that if Veloso goes, Moutinho can drop in support as well. So maybe you go with a Veloso knowing that you have a little bit more defensive cover in a player like Moutinho anyway.
All right, guys. Still have some questions about this Portuguese lineup that we'll see a little bit later. But, Jesse, earlier this week, you and Matt took a look at how the U.S. could break down the Portuguese lineup and what the expectations were on what Klinsmann would try to do to score those goals. Let's take a listen to what you guys pointed to as the potential weaknesses in this lineup.
What we can see here is Portugal's 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3, depending on what you think of their wingers, and that's as good a place as any to start. So let's take a look at how we think the U.S. is going to attack.
Yeah, when you look at their formation lineup, you can see big pockets in this area and in this area. So it will be important for our midfielders and our front runners to find those little gaps to now receive balls into those spaces. The other part about those gaps is that neither Ronaldo or Nani like to track back that often. So you would think that we'll be able to find guys in those space and then have our outside backs join in to create 2v1 options against their outside backs. And their outside backs aren't that great on one-on-one defending. So that's an area that we can get at them.
That's where Germany got at them as well. They constantly overloaded towards the flanks. A lot of times you saw more than half the German team on one side, long switch, suddenly transition, Portugal defending on their back foot, and they're not very good at that. And of course, if that's where the game is going to be played for the U.S., I think there's another spot where it can be won, and it's right here. We saw Germany play a 4-6-0, basically. They didn't have a traditional center forward. Thomas Müller drifted off that back line and made the Portuguese defenders step out here where they're uncomfortable to try to defend him. And the dislocation between the central midfield and central defense provided plenty of space for him. Aaron Johansson, Clint Dempsey, probably Chris Wondolowski as well, I think anyway, are going to have to start their runs a little deeper, not let these guys get tight, make them backpedal, make them defend space.
Yeah, and along with that, if we can find players in those pockets, off of that you want to see penetrating runs, because none of the four like to now face their own goal and get into foot races.
Yeah, especially with Fabian Johnson on the overlap. The goal he scored against Turkey is a perfect example, I think, of what we're both talking about. Number 3, though, set pieces. Classic American soccer.
Yeah, for sure. When you look at their overall lineup, there's not a big amount of athleticism and big, strong guys. Knowing that the U.S. team is very aggressive on set pieces, that's an area where if we get good service and get good runs, we should be able to find chances.
Yeah, there are plenty of targets now, especially because I think John Brooks is going to start in this one. I expect him to go from the beginning. But set pieces are opportunity and danger, because if they clear a corner kick well and it's off to the races, nobody's catching Ronaldo. Even on one leg, he's going to be able to outrun just about everybody out there, and him in transition is the scariest thing in the world of soccer right now.
Wouldn't it be great to see John Brooks score another goal on a set piece?
I think we would all like that.
That would be awesome.
All right, guys, now we switch our focus a little bit to the U.S. national team and what we're seeing from them, what we're hearing from them. But I wanted to start, we had an interesting comment come from Landon Donovan after watching this Portuguese team in the first game. We talked a little bit earlier about billboard material for this Portuguese side. Here's some more of it. After seeing Portugal self-destruct, not just soccer-wise against Germany, but how they self-destructed mentally and how naive and amateur-ish they were and the way they played. I think they're not looking forward to Sunday's game. Nobody likes playing the U.S. because of what you saw versus Ghana. They get punched in the mouth and respond a few minutes later, guys. Landon Donovan backing up his former teammates, or I guess you could still call them his teammates, on the U.S. national team. And the way he called out Portugal, very interesting to see him kind of put them down a notch, I think, ahead of the U.S. game.
I think it's dangerous to look at Portugal and really base everything off that one game. This is why. I think when the game is going against them, then they become like that. A little bit similar to Mexico. When the game's out of hand, the Mexicans are known to then start, fouling, and the U.S. is used to that. So I think Portugal, when things go bad, that's what happens. But they're going to go into this game. They are a hard team, a confident team, secure team. Mentally, I think they're actually stronger than you would think if you just look at that game. I think when things are going bad, sure, they self-destruct. So what? Many teams do it around the world.
Yeah, and again,
when it's going bad for the U.S., they don't self-destruct
because they're great sportsmen.
No, right? Not because they're great sportsmen. If you're going to talk about mentality of one team, look at the mentality of the other team. The U.S. has a history of not self-destructing like that when things go bad. Sorry, Jesse, didn't mean to interrupt.
No. I think that, first of all, discipline will be a factor in this game, and I agree with Greg that that's an area where I think the U.S. can emerge. But it is very dangerous to think that Portugal's coming into this as a wounded team and that they're just going to back down. Because this is a very, very good team, very talented team that has been successful in qualifying. And what are they, third in the world or fourth in the world? So I wouldn't take them for granted by any means. And I think that's fair enough. Landon's handled, I think, this whole situation that he's been in really well. But as a team, I don't think there's any way that those guys are taking Portugal for granted.
Well, let's take a look at what Jurgen Klinsmann said about this game as well. He said, "This is our goal, and we believe in it, and believe we can go to Manaus and beat them. We want to get into the next round, and if it takes beating Portugal, then this is what we have to do. Our approach is not to go to Manaus and defend for 1-1 or 0-0 or whatever it is, but we go there and we want to win this game," which could affect lineup choices for Klinsmann. I memean, this is kind of, maybe it's more of those head games with his players, which we've seen go both ways. But what's your take on what the coach is saying days before a big game like this?
You have to go into this game with the mentality that you're going for the win. Okay, it's dangerous to go in with a defensive mentality and say we're only playing for a tie. However, as the game plays out and moves on, now the results and where they're at, and if they're at the 70th minute and it's a tie game, it's smart to keep things a little bit tight, to be a little bit more conservative, not mentally but tactically. So, you don't go into this game thinking that you're playing for a tie, but you're also cautious as the game goes on.
But I would argue that the U.S. wants to start this game in a defensive posture so that they can have a game similar to what happened with Ghana, where they're defensive and they frustrate the other team, because Ghana wanted spaces, they didn't get the spaces because the U.S. packed it in. Portugal wants spaces to attack, and I think the U.S. has to adopt a defensive posture. Now, he may not say it publicly, and fair enough, but I hope they go in not pushing the game.
Well, the reality is that both teams are better on the counter, okay, or in offensive transition. Yep. But Portugal's better on the ball than we are. So it's most likely going to be a game where they have the ball, they're in build-up, they're trying to break us down. We'll have a few moments like that, but I would expect us not to be as deep as Ghana, okay? But they will still, I think, come back a little bit, try to keep things tight, and look to still catch them on transition.
All right, I want to remind everyone, again, you can call in at 212-481-1951 if you want to ask the guys any questions. We have a couple of questions coming in also on Twitter. Use the hashtag BrazilBound. A lot of the questions that we had coming in already we're going to get to shortly, because we're going to talk about the U.S. lineup. But first I wanted to mention the history between U.S. and Portugal. When you look at their record, 2-2-1, not bad. Remember that huge win in 2002, which really set the tone for what was the U.S.'s most successful World Cup in the modern era.
But Bruce Arena mentions that game, and he says, look, we got a Portugal team that was not at their best. A year before is when they were at their best at that World Cup. They weren't. People still talk about Luis Figo being injured. They actually compare it to the Cristiano Ronaldo injury and him maybe not being in great form. Figo at the time wasn't. Mm-hmm. But you want to point stats out? That's a great stat to point out, Jason, but I'll also point this out. In World Cups, when the U.S. has won a game, the game after, they're 0-3-1. That's 3 losses and a tie
Get ready for a lot of dark clouds in this area today.
I just want to say, look how happy that made Simon.
Look
how happy
I'm
Simon
giving you
was
a great
to be
stat.
able to. Oh, it was the stat that made you.
For me, honestly, neither stat matters. Okay, the one about our previous record against Portugal, that's different teams. And same thing with the records after we win. So I think this team is mentally prepared for this game the right way, and it's going to really come down to who gets a couple of breaks and who's able to make a couple plays.
Okay, and we've talked now about the lineup that Portugal is going to put out there. We've talked about injuries. I want to talk a little bit about how the U.S. is going to line up defensively, potentially going against a tandem of what could be Ronaldo, Eder, and Nani on that front line for Portugal. We saw Beasler potentially an issue with his hamstring. When you look at the back line, are you expecting it to be the Fabian Johnson, Jeff Cameron, Beasler combination, or do they need to change things going up against these guys?
If Beasler's healthy and ready to go, I would expect him to be in the lineup. The only question is, does John Brooks replace him because he's not at 100%? I think that the moving forward with your back line and trying to build on camaraderie, to understanding, everything of now the back four moving forward in the tournament, I think you want to keep those guys together. And again, it's not going to come down to who can one-on-one handle the situations, because really nobody can, and no back lines in the world can handle Cristiano Ronaldo one-on-one. It's about now how the group's going to shift and deal with moments together.
All right, Jesse, you can head over, and let's take a look now at how we think the U.S. national team is going to line up for this game. We talked about the back line. Greg, take it away.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, we did talk about the back line. We do still project that it's going to be Beasley, Beasler, Cameron, and Johnson. Of course, Howard in here. But a change in the midfield here, Jesse. Let's talk about that a little bit. And you have Graham Jozy out here at right mid.
Yeah, there's been some question on the health of Bedoya. Most reports say that he's ready to go, but I think that now Jozy coming in the game, he made an impact when he came into the Ghana game, and I think fresh legs in that spot will be really important. So I would expect to see him there. We've already talked about Wando, so we have Wando there. And then defensively, I think that actually what this will look like a lot is a little bit more of a 4-4-1-1. Okay, right. So it'll drop Michael Bradley a little bit deeper and have him work with Beckerman together. And now that will be one of the challenges is how does the pairing of those two work? How does Jermaine work with Kyle? Those two worked so well together last game, other than the fact that they gave up too much of the wing. Now,
one thing that we might want to think about is, let's not forget that Ronaldo's out here doing his thing. So is there a chance maybe that Jones actually shifts over to this side and Jozy sits on this side?
Yeah, it's a possibility, and it would give Fabian Johnson a little bit more assistance with Cristiano Ronaldo, and you would think with Jones's mobility and speed, that would also give Johnson a little bit more freedom and confidence to move forward. So that's definitely a possibility.
Okay. Simon, what do you got?
Sure, you want to see Jermaine Jones going one-on-one against Cristiano Ronaldo. Well, that's a red card waiting to happen.
It might be a red card waiting to happen, but it might be a red card, by the way, on both sides. Because if Jermaine Jones is good at anything, it's getting into a player's head, right? He also has the athleticism, I think, to be able to stay with Ronaldo.
And Jermaine's never gotten a red card with the U.S., okay? And
more stats, Simon. More stats.
He's gotten yellows, but part of the way he plays and the aggressiveness and strength is what makes him so difficult to play against. So, and I think even the way he handled the situation in Ghana, he's kept his cool. He's played discipline. He's fit into what we've done really well. At this point, I think he's a major strength of the team, and we have to count on him to do his job.
Right.
All right, guys. Marking Cristiano Ronaldo is a major talking point of this game. I want to bring in the next caller. I'll remind everybody you can call in at 212-481-1951. And I want to bring in the next caller, Bailey, who has a question about marking Cristiano Ronaldo. Go ahead.
So knowing how dangerous Ronaldo is, do you think someone will slide over and assist our right back in marking him and also follow him around the whole game, man marking him?
All right. Is it a possibility to try and man-mark Cristiano Ronaldo and stick to him all game, or is it something that needs to be done with multiple players?
Well, look, I think that the caller brings up two good points. One is that someone's sliding over to assist. So I think very often when something is happening, you're going to see Cameron coming out here. You're going to see whether it's Bradley or Beckerman also sliding to help, and we'll get to that in a little bit more tactically. But Jesse, is there any chance that Fabian Johnson is going one-on-one, almost man-marking Cristiano Ronaldo?
I don't see that happening, and it would be less about the defensive part and more about the attacking part, because I think that one of the major strengths of the U.S. attacking-wise is when Fabian Johnson gets into the attack and he's overlapping, getting up and down the wing. So I don't see them tactically changing the way, playing in that manner. The only question is, when he does move forward, what does Ronaldo do? I think we can expect for the most part that he won't go with them all the time. So when he's now in the space, are there other guys now that are aware and available and shift over to make sure that the first pass just can't go to him and he can start running?
And that might also be another sort of point in the argument of Jones even on this side.
Yes.
If he's staying, because then if he's stuck one-on-one, personally, I'd prefer Jermaine Jones and Graham Zusi one-on-one with Cristiano Ronaldo in that situation.
Yes.
Whoever's covering Ronaldo, and this is a point that I'll bring up, I mean, look, Ronaldo's a big name. Ronaldo's a big superstar. I think the World Cup, people would argue, needs Ronaldo. And I think going into this game, as good a referee as you can be, that's a little bit in the back of your head. Mm-hmm. And I think every foul that he takes, and he knows how to draw fouls.
Yep.
He knows how to play act as well, Ronaldo does. I think that I worry about calls going his way.
But that's going to go either way, Simon. Well, regardless of who is out here, those calls are going to go his way.
But you want to make sure that guy is not aggressive. That guy is not playing into Ronaldo's hand.
You also want to make sure that he's smart enough and athletic enough to not get into, reckless situations where he comes in late in some ways. And Jermaine Jones is, as Jesse said, he's a very smart defender one-on-one. Right? Yes, he's hard and aggressive, but that doesn't mean that he's not smart in his defending. Right?
All right, Simon, I have a question that came in for you here from Jeffrey Peterson. He says, here's one for the guys on Brazil Bound. I feel like maybe we don't have to go out and defend all day long against Portugal. And if we want to maintain some possession, is there room for mixed Diskerud, that is, of course, despite the fact that he's a defensive liability, Aaron Johansson or Gulp, Julian Green? And
Green
he wants,
for sure, right,
he
Simon?
wants to know specifically from you, Simon. I know you have this love-hate affair with Julian Green.
The only scenario Green comes in is if the U.S. is up 2-0 and you want to really maybe try to get a speedy guy to cause issues and the game is fairly in it. I don't even know 2-0, maybe 3. But Diskerud and Johansson, I see them as second-half subs, and you're only seeing them if you're chasing the game. And the first guy you're seeing there, if you don't need a goal necessarily, I think the first guy you see is Diskerud. Because he'll help you manage the game, he'll help you possess, and physically he matches up well to kind of push up and manage those battles against the Ricardo Costas, the Bruno Alves, better than Johansson.
Let me
I think all
remind you,
three of those guys are subs.
You said if you're up 3-0, maybe you bring him in. But remember last time the U.S. was up 3-0 against Portugal in the World Cup. It ended 3-2, and there were some dicey moments in there. It will certainly be interesting, Johansson, I think, was the interesting one that everybody kind of agreed that it would be Wondolowski over Johansson as a starter in this game. What does Johansson lack that is making you so sure that he's not the fill-in here?
First of all, I'm not so sure. Okay, so let's start there. But I just think based on his last performance and the fact that he was light on the field and holding on to balls, on covering ground, like you would have hoped that he would have really injected some energy into the game. And the fact that he didn't, I think that's where you have questions.
That's what he lacks to me. Power. I think the word is power. And he feels like a light player on the field. He doesn't impact the game. And, I wonder if he shows as well as he does because he's playing in Holland. And where maybe you don't need power. You can get away with finesse. He's more of a finesse guy.
No, there's truth to that.
All right, we want to take a look at how we think this game is going to play out tactically between Portugal and the U.S. And there's been obviously a lot of talk about Cristiano Ronaldo and the role he's going to play. So, Jesse, why don't you head over to the tactics board with Greg and give us an idea of how you think this game plays out.
Yeah, we've said this a lot. We've talked a lot about Ronaldo, but I don't think you can over-talk how you defend Ronaldo, considering he's one of the top 2 players in the world. Jesse, I've set up a situation here for the U.S. and Portugal where U.S. loses the ball, say in this situation. The ball gets put out wide. Ronaldo now with the ball on the left side. What will the U.S. do in this situation?
Well, let's talk first about now the area of the field that Ronaldo is catching balls. if he's now receiving balls out here, it doesn't behoove Fabian Johnson to run out and try and defend the ball right away, because it's too easy for Ronaldo to just now make a little bit of a move and now be running by him. So, and then there's also going to be times like we've talked about where Fabian Johnson is actually ahead of the ball as they're attacking. And now the key is, in all these moments, is how close, when the ball turns over, do we have players so that they can now start to get numbers and shift over, right? You're going to see literally the whole team shift to that side to try and eliminate options for Ronaldo. Mostly on the dribble, okay? And the more that you can make them play sideways or back, the more you're doing your job. So, and again, even when there's two guys over there, he's still going to have the ability at times to get there. So it's going to be important for the next guy and the next guy to be available.
Okay, so let's set it up now where maybe Ronaldo picks up the ball a little further on, and the turnover takes place somewhere here in the midfield instead, right? And you also mentioned off air a little bit that you need to watch out for Eder as well. So let's say the ball now skips over, gets around Jozy, and he gets the ball here. Johnson is back. Cameron, Beasley, and Beckerman here.
Again, Ronaldo is most dangerous on the dribble. Okay, he is a good passer too in transition, and he can serve some good balls in the box. But the number one priority has to be don't get beat on the dribble. Okay. So now Fabian Johnson in these parts of the field is forced to get a little bit tighter so that Ronaldo doesn't have enough room to play penetrating passes into Eder or to Nani now coming in the far post. But again, this has got to happen. Now, Jozy's got to start to make his way over there. Beckerman, I mean, it's not like you're pushing 8 guys over there, but you have to load that part of the field defensively to try and cut away options and also be available if things break down.
Well, let me ask you this, because coaches talk about this all the time. You get a player like Ronaldo, and by the way, we should say Nani, a very skillful player on the opposite side as well. When they get the ball in this situation, would you prefer as a coach to see the defender push him outside, or would you want to see him push him inside where he has support?
Depends on the situation. If you have support and you feel like your midfielder is close enough, for sure, now you want to force Ronaldo to come inside, all right? But if now you feel like your numbers are not good here, where maybe it's 3v3, and in those moments it's in transition, now you want to direct Ronaldo away from the goal and try and put him end line, okay? All these things are easier said than done. We can sit and draw this up all day if we want. But the job that Fabian Johnson does, the job that Jozy, Beckerman, Jones, Cameron, and their ability to size up what's happening quick and make it as hard as possible. And including there, I do think they have to be physical with him. They have to let him know early in the match that they're not just going to let him have space, but they're going to be hard on him. Follow him in these parts of the field, right? Make it hard on him from the very first whistle and let him know he's in for a tough match.
And the other thing we may see, guys, before it's all out is that Ronaldo may switch to the other side. If he's not getting any success on one side, we've seen him do it for Real Madrid. We've seen him actually do it for Portugal as well here and there. He'll go to the other side and flip around. They want to find space for him wherever they can.
That was what I was going to mention. I was going to mention 2 things. One is the fact that you're going to see Ronaldo all over the field, and they're going to have to defend him all different kinds of ways, from the center, from the right, and the left. But what I wanted to talk about is how good he is off the ball. And we've seen him getting into the 18-yard box on those late runs. If they get the ball out to Nani, it's just as important that they are finding him as he's cutting into the box, because his athleticism is probably better or as good as anyone on the U.S. So how do you mark him going up for headers, whether it be on a corner kick or in the run of play?
Well, again, it's about identifying where he is. I think that maybe is the most important word to use for the approach of this game, is identify where Ronaldo is at all these different moments. And for sure, if Nani's putting in the ball, he's good at making runs. Give me an arrow there. Good.
There you go.
There, or he's also good at making runs far post. He's good with his head. He's strong in the air. So, again, it's just the ability of these guys to identify where he is and not lose track. So take what happened to Fabian Johnson last game with IU.
Yep.
We can't have that happening with Ronaldo. You cannot lose track of him.
And I think just as important is that Cameron is probably the most athletic center back that the U.S. have in terms of his ability in the air in particular. We know Ronaldo can jump through the roof, so Cameron's probably going to be the guy who's going to have to deal with him. That leaves Beasley on Eder. So maybe there's a mismatch there in that case. Simon, what do you got?
Jesse, I'm curious, as a coach, the special player like Cristiano Ronaldo, we saw it with Messi in the first game Argentina had against Bosnia, where the Bosnians, there were 3 Bosnians. As soon as Messi touches the ball, 3 guys surrounded him. Do you issue an order to your team? When Ronaldo has the ball, he has to be double teamed. I know we went through how you contain him when he gets the ball, but is it an automatic double team?
It's an emphasis on making sure that you get numbers around the ball. Okay, I don't think you can say an automatic double. You don't want to give your players ultimatums that now they do one thing and that something else happens and they say, well, I was doing what you asked. You want them to understand how to process playing against a player like this, tactically how you're going to deal with it, but then also entrust them to now make decisions on the field and understand what it's like to play against a guy like that and how to eliminate his options.
All right,
and then one of the messages you say is, let's not let Ronaldo beat us.
Right.
Okay. Let's let some of the other pieces see if they can beat us. Let's not let Ronaldo beat us.
And you force them. So Jesse, I want you to head back to the desk. And guys, I think that's a great final point in terms of Nani. We haven't really talked about him, and maybe we're all over talking Ronaldo. But as Jesse said, don't let him beat you. Force these other guys who we know are not at the same level to try and do the damage.
All right, guys, a lot of talk about this game, a lot of time left until we see it at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can see it on ESPN or Univision in the States. And, of course, we're going to be back for a live post-game show after the match, probably about 8:10 p.m. Eastern Time here on MLSsoccer.com. Same phone number, 212-481-1951. We want to get your thoughts after the match. You can also tweet using the hashtag BrazilBound. But let me get your predictions. I mean, we don't want to leave without putting you guys on the spot and making you pick the game. I'm going to start off with Greg. Greg, who do you have in this match?
I have the United States winning 2-1. I like this U.S. team. I think that Portugal are a wounded animal in some cases, and I think that if the U.S. comes out quickly early on, I think that they can sort of put them down a little bit and go after them, and they do implode. Look, they're good. They're going to get a goal, but I think the U.S. goes up 2. They give up 1. They fight and claw to hold on to it 2-1.
We've seen a little bit of unpredictability in second-round games. I think that this game fits into that category. It could go a lot of different ways. But in the end, I'm very hopeful that the U.S. can get an early goal again, maybe keep things tight and keep it. I have 1-1 draw.
I see a very similar game to what we saw against Ghana, but I think the Portuguese, I think, are more resourceful. They have better ideas, more technical players, more game breakers than Ghana do in that kind of scenario where I see the U.S. defending, and I think the U.S. doesn't get lucky a second time because that early goal, it was lucky to get that goal. Great skill, but also lucky to get it that early. It helped the game. I think Portugal win this 1-0.
Actually,
he picked Ghana last game, so this could be good luck for us. So the dark cloud could continue to be good luck for us U.S. fans.
It could be, and we'll go with that. I took a 1-1 draw here as well. I think it's going to happen a little differently than what Greg said. I think Portugal gets that first goal, probably not to the second half. I think it's going to be a tight game. But I do see the U.S. kind of being able to have that magic at the end of the game, push the game and scratch a goal at the end, which, again, could be enough. When you look at the group standings, the U.S. gets a draw against Portugal. It puts them in a spot to then tie Germany and have them both go through to the next round. For me, that's a golden result. So a draw or a win here for the U.S.
But it's only golden because you're assuming that Germany and the U.S. are going to agree to tie the last game.
Yes.
The U.S. does not do that kind of stuff.
The U.S. could lose that game and still
Luckily,
advance.
we're coached by a German who may do that
still
stuff.
advance.
I know they could, but a lot of things got to go in your way for that to happen.
All right, guys, you can see there the U.S. advances with a win. We'll all push for the win so Simon doesn't have to deal with the handshake behind the scenes and the 1-1 draw.
But it's not happening, I'm telling you.
All right, one more time, I want to remind everyone, we're going to be back after the US-Portugal game to dissect everything that went on, to take your phone calls. Again, 212-481-1951 is the number you can dial in tonight after the match. We're talking about 8:10 p.m. Eastern Time here on MLSsoccer.com. For the guys, Greg Lalas, Jesse Marsch, Simon Borg, I'm Jason Saghini. Thanks for joining us on Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol High Mileage GTX.
Streets to the big city lights, where everybody feels it when things get tight. But we've been here before and we'll be here again. Tighten up our belts.